how many people are tuning in for Fire today. We have the one, the only author, creator of Dilbert, the one and only Scott Adams. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Sonnie.
Thank you so much for coming through. So I want to make sure we stay with protocol of the show. So this is what we do every single time we have a first-time guest in. The first-time guest gets to introduce topic of conversation, so you can give them a more thorough introduction of yourself, which I don't think they really need because who doesn't know who you are? Or you can tell them what's on your mind, or just start the conversation anywhere you want. The floor is yours. Take it over.
All right, perfect. Most of you know I got canceled worldwide, so Dilbert will not be in books or newspapers or websites in the old way. It'll only be in my local subscription site. That's scottadams.locals.com after March 13th. But what you might not know from looking at the headlines is that if you thought I was fully canceled, that's only partly true. It turns out I was half canceled, which was not even clear to myself until recently. But it turns out that only Democrats canceled me. And the entire conservative right part of the country either said, well, maybe you should have used different words, or I wouldn't have done that. But once I looked at the context, yeah, no problem. And Black Americans who looked at the context were usually just curious to talk about more, like, what do you mean by this? And, what are you getting at? But generally it was white Democrats who canceled me, and they were the ones in the decision-making roles who did all the canceling, for the most part. I mean, everything's a generalization, so nothing applies to all people. So that's why we're here. What people don't know, and was only revealed this morning by me, is that there was a larger plan, and maybe we could talk about that today.
Okay, so when this first happened, right? I was in the field of this is not fucking helpful, right? Like I was really there because of my long-standing fight that I have with conservatives. And after hearing your interview with Hotep Jesus, I still was feeling that way. After you popped in our space and I talked to you for a minute, I started to think about it. And I was like, this would be the equivalent of me calling Mickey a Minnie calling Mickey a mouse, or Donald calling Daisy a duck. Because this is what I do with conservatives all of the time, is say the provocative things to draw them into the conversation and make them to start looking at things differently. We call it triggering here on Sonnie's Corner. And I tell them up front, I'm about to trigger you. And then I actually do it, and it still works. They still get triggered. So this is something, I am very, very familiar with tactically. So for me, looking at it and not recognizing that off the bat is kind of the one thing. And also, I've been canceled from all conservative enclaves except here at Sirius XM and like the Gutfeld show. So like everything else, I've been canceled from as well. So I understand that version of the conversation as well, but instead I've been canceled by all the white conservatives, all the white Republicans.
Right.
So,
well, okay. But it turns out that white people are doing all the canceling. I don't know how many black people.
It always is funny that it sounds that way,
Right.
All right. So you sent me your reframe, right? So I want to give you a chance to phrase it the way you want to phrase it, and because I'm probably going to have a different interpretation on a couple things. So I want to see what you want to bring up as being the most beneficial part of your conversation.
So let me tell you what I was planning. I'll tell the audience what I was planning, and then how it all went wrong. So what I expected was I would provoke my little audience, who are pretty well trained, probably the same way your audience is, that I trigger people, I draw energy to myself, and then I reframe the situation so everybody walks away saying, oh, I didn't see that coming, but that's kind of useful. Now, what happened was I didn't realize how provocative it was. And so it got out of my little ecosystem, and I got canceled worldwide. But weirdly, that didn't change the plan. It just added way more energy than I expected. So I had to wait a few days just until the energy died down and people were still curious. And then I executed the plan. And it looks like this. The thing I'm trying to reframe, and by the way, reframing is the process of taking a problem where everybody's stuck mentally, and let's say fixing race relations. That'd be a good example, right? People are kind of stuck. And what you need is a different way to look at it, or potentially. I'm just offering it as an option. And so the reframe I was looking for was that essentially rich white people need to keep the race baiting going because the clickbait media depends on it. But more importantly, the news does it for free because they get clicks on anything that's outrageous. But if you follow the money, which doesn't mean somebody had a meeting and they all talked about it. I'm not saying that. But follow the money is so predictive. And the best thing for the people in power, mostly rich white people, is to not have the lower class work together to go get some of their stuff, to try to do something powerful from the poor. So if we're focusing on fighting each other, then the people in the lower economic rungs are not going to realize that they're on the same team. Black America, white America, everybody else who's in the lower economic strata. So the big picture is that follow the money guarantees that we will be in this fight mode over things that are largely artificial in the sense that we could work productively if we weren't fighting about it. So here's the reframe I'm looking for. If we could collectively get out of the us against them racial model, which is being forced upon us. People don't really make up their own minds on politics or even the big social stuff. We feel like we do. But if you talk to almost anybody, except probably you, Sonnie, you would be an exception to this, almost anybody you talk to, a regular citizen, their opinion will match exactly what somebody on TV said. You'd think everybody'd have sort of their own opinion, but you don't see that. You see people line up with what they watched on TV. So I'm trying to get past that, past the race war, which is largely ginned up by the people who benefit from it, the news and the people in power, and reframe it as there are two problems with, let's say, systemic racism, which, just to be clear, I'm super leftist in my social thinking. So people sometimes think I'm a MAGA conservative Republican. I don't identify as conservative. I'm left of Bernie on a lot of social stuff. So I have a pretty long history of trying to work with Black Lives Matter. I've been in favor of getting rid of statues because I think it's offensive to too many people. That's just a good enough reason to me. I supported prison reform primarily because it was extra beneficial to Black Americans. I thought that was unfair. So I have a pretty long history in public of supporting one side fairly substantially. And I was even putting my own money behind building a curriculum on methods for success, the stuff they don't teach you in school. And that project was going, and I even described it as primarily aimed at Black Americans. But as Hawk Newsom once taught me, and I buy into this, fixing things for Black America ends up fixing things for everybody if you do it right. So, for example, if you fix schools, you'd be doing it for everybody, but Black America would get more benefit because you're in the deeper hole. So here's my reframe. And I used Andrew Tate as my example just because it's so provocative. You're probably aware that a lot of school kids, especially the boys, are looking up to Andrew Tate, who's got some bad stuff he's allegedly done. I don't have any comment on that. He's innocent until proven guilty. But he's having a huge impact on young male minds, especially male. And the part that he has a big impact, unfortunately some of it's probably sexist stuff, but he also talks a lot about success. And what people don't realize, if they're not real news junkies, is that a whole lot of, and maybe all of it, that he talks about success is really hitting a mark. And he's talking about personal success. And how do you become successful? A huge part of that came from me. And a lot of people don't know that. He was a big fan of mine, tried to recruit me into his organization for, 2 years or something. But I rejected the joining the association. But when I watch him talk in public, I would see him say things that look like they came out of my mouth or on one of my books on the topic. And most people don't know that I'm and you can check this. I know it sounds weird if you think I'm just a cartoonist, but I'm by far the most influential person in the personal success space, both through my book, How to Fail at Almost Everything and Still Win Big, but also it influenced the whole generation of books after it. Atomic Habits, for example, gigantic bestseller in that space, and he credits me for some of the key ideas in that. So what I want to reframe is that systemic racism, while it must be dismantled in whatever ways we can over time, that's not your personal problem. Your personal problem is how you succeed. And you can make systemic racism nearly invisible or irrelevant in your life if you learn the things that Andrew Tate tells you to do, plus the things I tell you to do, plus anybody in this space who has good advice. So, there's a ton of people who now have really good things to say about how you should get ahead. None of this is taught in school. Now, this would be disproportionately useful for non-black kids at the moment because you have to have a good school before any of it really kicks in. I mean, if you get destroyed with a bad school and a bad neighborhood and stuff, it's going to be really hard to use success tricks to get out of that. But it would work. It would work.
Okay, I want to before you go any further, right? I want to stop and talk about some of the things that you kind of brought up, right? So, like bringing up the idea of the things that were taught at school, kind of the idea of how to be successful, how to put yourself into a better position, right? I want to add to that, and let's be philosophical for a minute. I want to add to that a question of morality, right? And I specifically want to target this at black men because this is what I got canceled for. I got canceled for looking at black men through the spectrum that I'm about to tell you. So the black boys where I come from in my neighborhood, where I grew up, they go to school. And the school feeds them the kind of the philosophy. The government hates you. What I call it is a SSSA education, right? They teach you slavery, they teach you socialism, they teach you segregation, and they teach you assassination, right? And if that's your frame view of how you look at history or your place in history or your place in the country, why would you want to be there, right?
Right.
But what they get from the streets is your avenues to success, but they're getting it from drug dealers. They're getting it from gang members. They're getting it from crooked sources, but they're getting the information. So it's the same kind of equation that you're making with Andrew Tate. You could say, well, he did some bad things, but look what he's given. This is what they're given. They're like, capitalism works the same way, right? It's supply and demand. It's you have a product, you have it's the same kind of idea of you building systems and understand how to work with your boys. Your boys handle this, you handle this, and y'all all come together at the end, and it works as group economics. Like, this is why they gravitate to the streets, because that's where these lessons are.
Right.
But
right.
when they go towards that now, and they have that attitude, now they are treated as, the other side of what that produced, being in drugs or women or guns or whatever, the negative side effects. But they're being drawn to the process. And all I said was, if conservatives looked at black men and understood that they are being drawn to the process, they are being it's not about your whiteness. It's not about none of this nonsense that white people got going on in their own white world is what is affecting black men in their movement at this moment. What is affecting them is they are being drawn to that success ladder. And if conservatives understood that and gave black men a basic moniker of respect for what they have done in their own right and understanding, then we wouldn't have this conversation. We would not be having these problems. That relationship between white conservatives and black America would actually be able to take hold. But here's the point. Conservatives will never let that happen, because they will tell you and come after you because you said systemic racism is real. This is what I believe. I don't do white supremacy. I don't do the racism. I don't do the white guilt. I don't do any of that. But you have to look at systemic racism. It has to be dismantled. You cannot leave it in place and think that black people are going to be able to build on top of that disturbed land. Like, that is
Right.
impossible. You have to
Right.
remove
Yeah.
it.
And Sonny, would you agree that the biggest lever is education? That the school system is broken?
The biggest lever is, no, to me, the biggest lever
Systemic.
missing.
The
I
biggest part is
definitely think
systemic
the
racism.
school. I definitely think that the school system is broken. But you asked me what the biggest lever is. What I
Yeah.
think the biggest lever is, as white people, white conservatives especially, and white progressives in a different way, but white conservatives especially, will not see black people as we are. They will only see the stereotypes. They will only see the talking points. They will not look at us and see beyond that. And I'm a perfect example of it, because I can go into any space. Nobody ever says that I'm wrong. No one ever questions my conservatism. They never question my principles. None of those things are ever in question. But I am constantly questioned, just because I'm like, these principles apply to black people. They are already in black people. You don't have to teach them to black people. All you have to do is recognize what is already apparent and steadfast in black people. But like you said, they want to look at the progressive representation. And I say progressive, but it's really both of them. What happens is the progressives put out a stereotype of black people. Conservatives react to it, be it positive or negative. So let's put you in that space. You say move away from all black people. Conservatives react to it. So now you have all the white conservatives coming out telling us why they are actually superior to us, while white people are actually better. So it's not the initial incident. It's not you saying it. It's how the white conservatives respond once you say it. And now it becomes this entire movement. And I know Hotep was trying to get you to talk about this when you were on his show, about how you affect the white nationalists, how you affect the white racists, how, and understanding, if you understand that the media is starting this, that helps the media. That helps the Republican punditry class. That helps them to continue with their distraction of white conservatives. And so that is my number one thing where I'm like, you have to focus on, is seeing black people clearly. So I'll take your success model. You said
Sonny, say a little bit more about seeing clearly. Are you talking specifically about the fact that young black men are looking at a model of capitalism? They're just learning it from a different source? Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Yeah. Oh no, they called me crazy. They called me crazy and ran me out of discussion because I said so.
Okay.
And I
Well, I wouldn't run you out of discussion for that. That sounds like just an observation of the obvious. So let me add to that.
10 years. But I want to give you a quick example, because I want you to talk about the success model and the building stat models, right? So you say, because you say, if you do this, you'll be okay, right? If you do these things, X, Y, Z, you'll be okay. So I'll take the case of Jay-Z, right? So again, he comes from the initial model that I offered you, right? The one he sought out the model, right? But he had to go through the destructive to get to the model. But now he's at the model, he skill stacks. He's in different industries. He's in real estate. He's opening business. He's making deals with Duce. He's spread out all over the place, right? Very, very successful. Married, with father taking care of his kids, like on every single aspect you could call successful. Conservatives and Republicans will still look at him like nothing more than his past, and it never makes it okay with them. They can never see and say, okay, this is a model. This is a way that if black men are following his pathway, then this is something we can get behind. Black men, especially those in hip hop, and especially those that come from the culture, are not given any kind of just benefit of the doubt. when it comes from
Yeah,
white conservatives,
well,
white Republicans.
I have a real problem with that myself. The people you're mentioning, you could name 10 other names.
I can name
You see
30 other
people who
names.
have great talent stacks, in other words, combinations of talents that work well together, and you see an immense work ethic. Like none of those people are doing that without immense work. Like there's so much to learn from any of them. I agree with that. But can I add a few things?
Hmm. Actually, can we take a quick
Um,
break and come back and let you add?
yes.
All right, let's take a quick break. We're going to come back with more from Scott Adams.